Hello, and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Welcome back, Thanasi.
Salutations and peace, listeners of the show.
In today's episode, we review all the action from WWE Backlash, including our thoughts on the stellar match between Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles, as well as the opening round matches on WWE Raw in the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments. We also discuss our thoughts on AEW Dynamite, including a discussion on what the current state of AEW's men's single division is in. We will finish this week's episode by looking back on some of the standout King of the Ring winners over the years and come to a decision on who we believe is the greatest ever King of the Ring. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. And if there is a certain topic that interests you more than the other, please feel free to jump to it using the timestamps in the description below. On that note, Thanasi, let's dive right into Backlash. Now, before we go into any singled out matches and such, what did you think about this show?
100%. It was, mind you, I'll preface this by saying it was a great pay-per-view, right? Good matches. But 100%, the MVP was the crowd in France. Jesus Christ, that should be the standard that we hold ourselves to. I was getting vibes of the takeover days of NXT Black and Gold. Like it was that good, probably, and then some, really. Like the volume was insane, the energy was insane, the chant of Il est vraiment phénoménal was just absolutely lit. I thought it was a fantastic event overall. Couldn't sing the praises of it more, but perhaps you might want to actually break it down blow by blow, as it were.
Well, let's go straight into the beginning of the card, and we opened up with a street fight type tag team match between Kevin Owens and Randy Orton and the Bloodlines Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga, which I think was a very smart decision in the end because you had an already feral uh crowd there in Lyon, and then you just fed them absolute violence and chaos, and everyone just ate it up. Is that a fair assessment of it, Thanasi?
This was the perfect way to open a pay-per-view like that because the energy was so high going into that, right? Like there was no pre-show match, so they were all just really, really gunning for this opening contest. Kevin Owens was the first one to walk in, got a monstrous pop, really soaked it in on the entrance ramp as well. He really took his time, and then the French crowd singing along to Voices during the entrance of Randy Orton. And mind you, Voices is a catchy tune, and it's been around for a while. American crowds don't sing Voices, right? So this was like an oddly unique and unexpectedly unique phenomenon to see, which I really, really enjoyed. So having that big babyface reaction to both of these wrestlers, and then the crowd maintained kayfabe by booing Solo and Tama Tonga, by booing the MFT as well. They really stuck with it and just added to that energy. So when the brawl started to happen in the ring, you felt like, yes, it's game on. Like we're really, really keen for this match to take place. And then taking it up to 11 when Nigalda said that it's lâchez-vous, and said, let's give it to the crowd. Let's give them the street fight that they wanted. Very high energy. I mean, who says no to multiple table spots, right?
Well, no one really does, especially not in today's climate. Obviously, this match was fantastic and it got brutal at certain moments, but I think the biggest talking point coming out of it is actually the debut, or rather the re-signing of Tangaloa to WWE. Fancy, what was your thoughts on this addition to this new look bloodline?
Well, it was interesting because we were all expecting for Jacob Fatu to actually join. So having Tangaloa come in was, like they swerved us, good on them for it. And it just means that moving forward, we could even expand the bloodline. It just really shows the extent of the Anawai family that you can bring in people. Like you were already making predictions of who can come in, and they just keep one-upping us anyway. The only disappointing thing about this is that Tangaloa came in to break up the pinfall, which really, in my view, having interference there, it still protects Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. Because if you remember last week on the show, I actually predicted that it'd be a bit more methodical booking, in as much as they would beat the shit out of one of them backstage. So it would be an effective handicap match, and that would make the MFT and Solo look really strong. But introducing someone else into the fold did get a nice little reaction. It does offer some growth and development to the storyline because we've got new characters coming into the narrative. So overall, quite positive, and maybe we're looking towards some kind of a trios match, a six-man down the line with this new look bloodline and the OG bloodline, Usos and Roman.
Some other matches that we had to witness matches like Damian Priest versus Jey Uso, with Damian Priest retaining. We had the match like Bayley also retaining in the triple threat against Naomi and Tiffany Stratton. And then we actually have new champs now with the women's tag team championship because it was won by Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill. What are your thoughts on them defeating the Kabuki Warriors and gaining that accolade?
I'd say quite expected in one way. You and I think we both predicted that they would take the victory. It does seem like the right natural step for Jade and Bianca, the way that things have been going into WrestleMania and then coming out of WrestleMania. So I think it's quite rational. I would, I think ideal fantasy booking is down the line, 1 month, 2 months down, that they turn on each other while they are the champions, and that lets us bleed into the creation of a WWE Women's Intercontinental Championship, where maybe they both face off, saying they can't stand each other. They're still dominating the tag division. So dissolve the tag division anyway and just make it a singles thing.
Interesting. So you think that there's the potential that that's the. Do you think that's a smart decision to do if they do go down that road?
I think it's A, smart. I think it's B, rational. But I think it's C, not going to happen. I don't see them actually ended up going with it, but it's fantasy booking after all.
I think with the good thing with the NXT system is they made the women's tag team division seem a lot more growing compared to when the main rosters had to do, because main roster is still working with makeshift teams. NXT's been a good system for actually developing them from a younger age or from younger in their careers. But I'm curious about that sort of development, but maybe we save that for another day because the other match that we really need to discuss, even if it's just to collectively praise it, is Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles for the undisputed WWE Championship. Then I say this was a match that a lot of fans were looking forward to, myself included. And in this day and age, we've seen matches can sometimes not live up to the expectations that we put on them. For you, how did this match live up to the hype?
It certainly got there, right? It was given the appropriate amount of time. I was super satisfied as far as the booking outcome, of course. They really did have a good, solid go at the wrestling. I liked the fact that Cody did not have to pull out his triple Cody cutter because like you do it all the time and it becomes meaningless, right? So being able to just push for it multiple times, get the crowd up and going, I think they wrestled really well. AJ's performance was also quite strong. Like he didn't look weak at all in defeat. And of course, he had the crowd behind him, right? Because they kept chanting about how phenomenal the bloke is. So overall, it's great that having finally gotten this match, because think about it, like for so many years, Cody was a WWE mainstay between his debut in the industry and roughly 2016 with his release. And his release coincided with AJ Styles signing with WWE. They've been together in the same promotion since 2022. It's been a couple of years and still haven't gotten into the ring together. So it's a very, very tasty concept that it ended up working out quite well.
For me, there are a couple of points there I wanted to build upon. One, with you said that when you said that Cody didn't have to pull out the triple crossroads, I completely agree. Now, give that finisher some time to actually settle some matches on its own. But on that point as well, and this is what's got me excited for potentially the future, AJ Styles didn't even pull out some of his chief weaponry during this match. They went a long time and he was finding other ways to get offense in. But to me, it left the door open for potentially these guys going at it again down the road. I don't know if they're going to have an immediate rematch at King and Queen of the Ring. I think AJ Styles may have been added into the King of the Ring bracket for SmackDown, but I loved the first match, and I definitely think that they've left enough there to whet the appetite for another. To whet the appetite now, but to also leave the door open for a future match again between the pair.
If I can raise this particular point, no, I don't think AJ is going to be in the world title match, because he is indeed in the King of the Ring. He's going to wrestle Randy Orton. But more importantly, I think this may have been a taste of the fact that AJ's style may be adjusting now, his wrestling style, because he was very much an all-rounder. He didn't have one technique, right? He was kind of like a Shawn Michaels, where there were elements of technician, there were elements of high flying, there were elements of just innovation, brawling as well. And maybe now at this point of his career, he's trying to switch it up, maybe to make it more sustainable and nevertheless maintain the impressiveness. Because you see his body has transformed, which means that there's another element to his appeal. If he can't run the ropes in the same way in every single match across the house show circuit, across the TV circuit, maybe he wants to adjust his wrestling approach in the ring in order to still maintain an appeal in the twilight of his career.
Moving on to WWE Raw, the the episode was filled with basically, I think, 5 King and Queen of the Ring first round matches. And I don't know about you, but like, let me just list them for you. Jey Uso beat Finn Balor. Ilya Dragunov beat Ricochet. Gunther beat Sheamus in the main event. Lyra Valkyria beat, I think, Ivy Nile, and Io Sky beat Natalia. And I honestly think this might have been one of the strongest TV episodes of Raw in terms of an actual in-ring element. Because I felt like almost all of these matches delivered exactly as they needed to. What did you make of that?
Well, I'll put it to you this way, right? And this is a complaint that I've said on the show as well, is that due to the size of Raw's programming, which is 180 minutes of broadcast, they don't always dedicate all of their show towards some kind of a pay-per-view build, right? It's not always about story development with an end in sight. So sometimes it's throwaway, it's a thrown together matches. All of the 5 that you mentioned, they are building towards the next pay-per-view. They are part of that tournament, they're part of the King of the Ring. So having that focus there has been really, really beneficial, because it means there's direction to the matches, to the wrestling, to the storylines. Example also, that counters that, the counterfactual. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre did have an angle going on that wasn't building up necessarily to the pay-per-view, but it was still very prevalent and prominent main event stars. It wasn't your undercarders actually coming out there and just filler. And if I can add on this point, the reason some of these were so impressive is, especially on the men's side, with the women's perhaps to a lesser extent, but Jey Uso versus Finn Balor went close to 14 minutes. Ilya Dragunov versus Ricochet, again, close to 15 minutes. Gunther and Sheamus in the main event went over 20. These were essentially either undercard or mid-card level pay-per-view quality matches. So when you're presenting that kind of a showing, of course, you're going to have a really good episode of TV, aren't you? But yeah, overall, I think that's the message that I want to put forward, is that there's direction here. And I like that, because we're 2-3 weekends away from the pay-per-view anyway.
And even the other match that was on Raw that wasn't about the tournament, but it was Chad Gable versus Bronson Reed, and that's now contributed to the Intercontinental Championship match at King and Queen of the Ring.
Indeed.
So you're absolutely right. And I just want to quickly highlight, you mentioned CM Punk, and any listener of this channel knows how much we love talking about CM Punk. What did you think of his segment on Raw this weekend,
Well,
this week.
of course, we love CM Punk. We put his straight edge X in our channel's logo, right? Um, Look, anytime CM Punk appears on television, he's must see. And his promo was very good. It wasn't so much using the old taglines as he was last week, right? This one was more about calling out Drew McIntyre. I'm really, really liking this slow burn, and I don't always enjoy slow burn because I fear the match kind of or the flame dissipating on the match. But this one really does feel like they've got something going here, so that when these two finally do confront each other in the center of the ring, perhaps on the go home show before the pay per view where they actually will confront each other, that it's going to have that big fight feeling. It's going to have that big moment heat, right? Kind of like when Becky Lynch walked out night after Royal Rumble 2019 to stand face to face with Ronda Rousey. It's like, we've been waiting for this for so long. And I think that that's really what's happening here, probably for the best so far, that the two have been making a lot of TV appearances, but not face to face in the ring together. And I think it really creates that sense of anticipation for this match.
And I'm impressed with it as well, given the fact that we know CM Punk is injured, and we don't know exactly when he will actually be fully recovered. We won't know until it's probably he announces it himself. And now with Drew McIntyre supposedly also nursing some sort of injury, the fact that they've kept the interest in the feud and it's actually elevating, and you can almost feel like it's reaching towards that peak where they finally compete, like you said, has big match feel to it. And I think that's one of the good things about bringing CM Punk into the fold now, is he's going up against a lot of people that he has interacted with before, but their level has now increased so that they're on par with him, or at least approaching him. So I'm very excited, and I think this Raw was fantastic. Darcy, you said yourself as well off the show that you were really impressed with SmackDown as well.
Well, the thing is, like SmackDown had that French crowd as well, right? And as soon as they came in, because you could tell that the French crowd was going to be hot, because the second Bailey walked out to open the show, they were insane for her, right? And that was very important because they didn't even send out all the baby faces consecutively. They sent out two baby faces, all the heels, and then the other two baby faces for the 8-woman tag. But nevertheless, they were hot all the way throughout. And in particular, for LA Knight's promo, they were really keen for it. But also, I was super impressed with the crowd for the Kevin Owens and Randy Orton show, the RKO show. They were really, really keen for it. And a talk segment like that had no business being as good as it was, because these guys were just so on top of it. And then, of course, in the main event of the evening, which was the face to face, the final word between Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles, that's where we saw the first, or the what seemed to be a spontaneous combustion when AJ Styles just said the words "I am phenomenal," where they started to bust out the "Il est vraiment phénoménal," bouncing up and down. We even had the tease of the Too Sweet, because both of them are former Bullet Club members, leaders, whatever. So I was super, super impressed with this week's SmackDown programming, and I like the formula here. I like the formula of the SmackDown before represents the pre-show before the international show, the international pay-per-view, that is.
And it feels like it makes sense as well for the wrestlers, because then the SmackDown roster and whoever's on for that show can just go there ahead of time, get prepped up rather than it
Warm
be
them
something
up.
chaotic.
That's
Exactly.
right.
All right, well, crossing borders to AEW, we had Dynamite this week, and when I was watching it, it provoked this thought that I had, and I thought it'd be. I was talking to you off air about it, and you said, Dimitri, what are you doing? We're about to record our episode. Why not just raise it on the show? So that's what I'm doing. And it basically, the question I had is, what is the current state of AEW's men's singles titles? And where is the hierarchy? Because on the surface, it is very clearly AEW World Championship is the supreme title. It's the number one. And then right below it, we have the TNT Championship and the International Championship formerly the All Atlantic Championship, is below the TNT. However, what we've seen of late, especially this year, is we've had a stellar run from Christian Cage as the TNT champion be ended by Adam Copeland. Two of their biggest stars, Adam Copeland, definitely probably their biggest recognized star, and they've both been holding on to that secondary title. On the tertiary title side, we're now going to see Roderick Strong go up against Will Ospreay, and Will Ospreay is one of these guys that is not only developing as a star, but he's already there to compete for the world championship. He's someone that you could throw in to face Swerve tomorrow, and it would feel like it makes sense. So then, with all that said, Swerve Strickland is the world champion, and before him, Samoa Joe. It feels like this year, the world championship's focus has not been as intense with these other things going on with the TNT Championship, the tertiary international championship is getting some sort of focus, and we even have not relevant to the titles, but stories like what's going on now with the new elite taking over AEW feels like that has more prevalence over AEW programming. So I see, what are your thoughts on the current state of the titles in the men's singles division?
So, I mean, you've raised a lot of points there. Let me just kind of touch on a couple of them. So, at least on the World Championship, you had what was effectively the franchise player in MJF have it for close to a year, over a year. So whoever was going to follow him was naturally going to suffer some kind of a small drop in prestige, right? And that was going to be natural. Like it's something you have to accept when you end a long reign like that. So, and I mean, that being said, I actually thought that Joe's reign was a lot better than I was anticipating it to be, because I thought it was going to be like a transitional, maybe like 30-day or less champion. So Swerve also, he's still finding his groove because, mind you, it's only been a couple of weeks since he won the strap.
It's very fresh.
And he's still cementing himself. Whereas you look at the storyline, compare that with the storyline of the TNT Championship. Christian, even though it wasn't one long consecutive reign, has been on and off champion for a very long time. Following on from that, Adam Copeland, because he's trying to have this cope open and maintain the prominence and the visibility of the TNT Championship. It's there, it's in your face, right? It's very clearly a television title. And because these guys are established world champions, not maiden world champions in the same way that Swerve was, it is going to benefit from that sort of, the man makes the title, not title makes the man. So I think that's where it is. I don't necessarily think that AEW is intentionally trying to push down the world title and then promote the TNT title above it. I think that some of these are just natural sort of follow-ons from the people that tend to hold it. Now, with the international title, this is the one where I'm a bit more confused about it, because exactly like you said, Will Ospreay, he's like someone you can have at the top of your singles rankings, therefore making him a number one contender for the world title. When they entered him in the Casino Gauntlet, I saw him come out and I was like, oh, that's big, gets a pop. But if he's going to be in this match, he has to win it. And he did. And if he's going to win the match, he also has to become the champion, because you want to have him for a bit of an undefeated streak, following his permanent signing. So I think that is a little bit of a mismatch on that end. Again, maybe there's something behind the scenes where he's going to pull out, or maybe they do want to give him the belt just to kind of keep him away from the main event scene as like just like have him be prominent, have him make the title, but keep him away from Swerve for some amount of time. So that's my thought there. If I can add on this part as well, the international title, at least while it was in the hands of Orange Cassidy, it was an unofficial but effective television title, because he was defending it every week, and essentially he was opening basically every Dynamite to defend it. So that title does have some strength and some momentum, but I think overall, I'm not convinced that it was the right booking call to put Will Ospreay in the storyline for that. But I do think there's a reasonable explanation for where the world title scene and the TNT title scene are at the moment.
The thing I find interesting with the international title situation is that wrestlers like, in my opinion, this is really just my opinion, but wrestlers like Orange Cassidy, Roderick Strong, Ray Phoenix, who are all former champions, to me, they have a ceiling within AEW. They're not necessarily guys that will ever win the big one, or if they do, it's going to be like a for the moment and for a short-lived time. But within that, we've got a former champion in John Moxley, who's legitimately one of the biggest wrestlers in the world and in AEW, one of their most successful wrestlers. And in the event that Osprey maybe wins this title, he's another huge name to win this championship. Is this potentially their way of trying to add immense legitimacy to the international championship?
I'm sure they want to have legitimacy to it, right? Because they have so many belts, they're probably over flooded with championships in AEW that sometimes like too many kind of reduces the meaning of all. So this might be like a Hail Mary in trying to say, yes, we're going to make this a very prestigious championship in our promotion. It's also possible they might be heading for a unification at some point. So this is an easy way to have that happen.
In any case, I think it speaks volumes that we're speaking of the TNT Championship as highly as we are, and it speaks volumes that we believe the idea of a Will Ospreay winning the international championship could feasibly really raise its stock. And the best case scenario for AEW is that all three championships all of a sudden mean a lot and that they have a lot of weight to it. That's obviously the best case scenario. My only concern is there is the potential that the the world championship scene needs to be protected sometimes. And especially when you've got a first time champion there, I think you've got to find ways that what he's doing is as relevant, if not more. And I will say, having seen last week's segment with Christian Cage and this week's segment with Christian Cage, I think they've done a wise thing here to bring him immediately as his first real contender. I think that could do a lot to help him out.
It's the equivalent of what WWE did with AJ Styles being Cody Rhodes' first opponent, right? You have someone established, experienced, who's going to put the new champ over in order to provide that legitimacy. It's a time and tested formula.
And I would argue this is actually an even better example of it because Christian Cage is arguably the biggest heel AEW actually has. AJ Styles is just a tried and tested legend that WWE has that is still at the top of his game, but Christian Cage is legitimately the number one heel that company has. So I think it's a really, really good timing for them to go up against each other in the ring. And I hope all the best. And lastly, thank you for entertaining the discussion with me. Hopefully some people enjoyed it, or I'm not the only person in the world that's concerned or interested in what the current state of AEW's men's singles division is.
Or maybe our listeners and viewers can let us know in the comments section their views as well.
Well, Thanasi, let's now move on to the final segment for this week's episode of the Audible Finish, and that is our discussion that is all about really Kings of the Ring. King of the Ring is perhaps not the most significant of accolades for modern day WWE, but it is a huge part of the company's and more broadly wrestling history. And it has produced fantastic gimmicks, it's given wrestlers a career resurgence, and it's even been the catalyst that has skyrocketed certain wrestlers. With King and Queen of the Ring only a couple of weeks away, my co-host Thanasi and I thought we ought to sit down and discuss some of the great King of the Ring winners and come up with our own opinion, agreed upon between the two of us, of which wrestler is the greatest ever King of the Ring. Thanasi, we have a tall order ahead of us, trying to actually agree on a decision. Usually we just disagree with whatever thoughts we have, but I wanted to open it up and just dive straight into it. When you hear King of the Ring, who is the first wrestler that really comes to mind?
Ooh, so this is me personally,
This
right?
is you personally.
I think of a few. I think of a few, and generally I do associate it with people that have used the gimmick. Booker T, King Booker, is someone that I can't look past, right? With the pinky, with the accent. He got the gimmick so over that he fully deserved and got the heavyweight championship of the world. How can you like think anything less of the bloke?
And I want to add on to that because Booker T was someone on my list as well. Um, because I prepared some notes. I figured I might as well give it a crack just to have some things coming around. He won it in 2006. And I think the thing that's great is that he made the gimmick iconic. He's not the only person to do it, but he made it an iconic part of his career. And he found a perfect balance between playing it comedically, successfully, but then also being very legitimate. He became a world heavyweight champion as the King of the Ring winner, really. And I just felt like he's a perfect example of the career resurgence type of winner that King of the Ring can give certain wrestlers.
And if I can add on again, this is like a more personal touch. Someone that I have very vivid memories of because I was watching all we were renting all the DVDs from the local Video Easy is 2002 Brock Lesnar becoming King of the Ring. Why do I say that? He didn't do anything with the gimmick, right? In fact, the gimmick didn't last for him at all. But the thing is, it gave such legitimacy to the title of King of the Ring because he went on to SummerSlam to as the number one contender and won the world championship off of The Rock, and thereby becoming the youngest undisputed champion. And I just think that that's such a brilliant idea for the King of the Ring because it pairs up so nicely with winner of the Royal Rumble, you main event WrestleMania. Winner of King of the Ring, you main event SummerSlam. So that's another person that I have really, really fond memories of there.
I love it when they add stakes to the these sorts of wins, like with Money in the Bank. The idea that you actually get a future opportunity, Royal Rumble, and I agree with you with King of the Ring. I feel like it's perfect for something like that as well. To go a bit old school, I want to talk about some of the earlier Kings of the Ring, and the first person that really made it a gimmick, I feel, is Harley Race, and he won it in 1986, and he pioneered the idea of what it meant to be a King of the Ring winner, really. And I think in WWE, he's really more known for that than anything else in his career. Not to diminish any of his accolades, this guy was one of the great world champions around America. But what do you think of his legacy? Obviously, we didn't live it, but like, what do you think when you look back on his career and those highlights?
Well, see, here's the thing, right? Like, if you look at the list of all the Kings of the Ring, not all of them ended up becoming world champion, right? In his case, I'm pretty sure he was a world champion, NWA world champion, before becoming King of the Ring. So this was another instance of, I guess, uh, the man makes the title, right? The title of King of the Ring. And putting that on him, he had the crown, had the cape. He did live the gimmick as well. And even though I didn't live that, that's something that exists very, very strongly in the collective consciousness of wrestling fans that, the King of the Ring, Harley Race, as having really brought that legitimacy to it. So I certainly think that he's up there.
And one of the other men that took the reins of his gimmick almost straight after is Randy Savage, the Macho King. He won it in 1987, though I think I'm right in saying that he actually carried the gimmick of King after the fact. But he really made something special with it, and I think Randy is like Holly Race. He's one of those wrestlers that really stands out as a as a King of the Ring winner because of that. I think, like you said earlier, gimmicks like they really help etch it into your memory. Because if you only win the tournament and then leave it, like it's a lot harder to actually leave an impact. What do you think of the King Randy?
Oh, look, I think we do have those strong memories of him. I mean, of course, Randy Savage, he did have the gimmick for a while, and he leaned into it for as like the heelish iteration of his ordinary gimmick of just, the macho man, which is like, very strong baby face, very popular. But he really did lead into this. And I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, that his queen around this time was Sensational Sherry. So as he was transitioning out of this, it would be a return to the baby face when Elizabeth came with him. So really leaning into it to get the proper heel reactions here. And of
There
course, can I just add on this interesting point that when he won, he defeated King Kong Bundy in the final. So, if you want to be the king, you got to beat the king.
Absolutely. To move on to the next pair of candidates that I have, and I'm gonna put them together because they are brothers. Bret Hart and Owen Hart. Now, to start off with Bret, he stands out to me not so much because he had a gimmick, but because he's a two-time winner and a back-to-back winner. And I think there's a lot to be said about that because I believe, even to this day, he's the only person that's ever won King of the Ring twice. So, what do you think about Bret's legacy with this tournament?
Again, so this was around the time that you can have a look at the list, because he won it in 91 and then 93. It wasn't consecutive years, but it was consecutive tournaments. And in as far as this was when Bret Hart was sort of breaking out properly, right? Because I think was it 1994 that it was WrestleMania 10 where he had his coronation. So this was actually slow build, but also a very appropriate build to say, this is our guy. This is our new generation star. So for him to have that, he had the wrestling acumen. It was positioned in the best way possible, because it was really trying to anoint him, if I can put it that way, right before he won his WrestleMania main event the following year.
And then obviously with his brother Owen, I believe he actually carried the gimmick for a while, and he made a thing of it with the King of Hearts. And I think what is so beautiful about these two with the King of the Ring is the fact that because it's in succession, so Brett won it two tournaments in a row, and then immediately after in 1994, Owen won it. So you can feel this legacy. And so when he says he's the King of Hearts, even though we weren't there during the time, it's easy for me as someone born way after the fact to understand how imposing and how much character work would have gone into actually saying he's the King of Hearts and what that meant, especially because it's like a dig against his brother. Like, what do you think of Owen, and how do you reflect when you think about him as a king character?
I don't have all the dates in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that when he did win it, I'm fairly sure that Bret Hart was world champion at that point. So it actually really played into the story quite well, because he's trying to say, it's the younger brother, up and coming. I've just won this tournament. Even though I don't have the world title around my waist, I still have the crown on my head, which means I have an argument to be the best. So it's kind of like this diarchy sort of, almost like the real world champion, because this was well before the era of two world champions in the one promotion. So a title like King of the Ring, when you're turning it into the gimmick as well, it's a real claim to fame, right? Like the only thing you can challenge it with is the Intercontinental Championship. So Owen Hart really leaning into it, and it's very memorable as well, right? The biggest shame on earth is that Owen Hart never became world champion. But for him to have been King of the Ring, that's a real special accomplishment for him and for his memory.
There is another candidate that I want to discuss very quickly as well, and he didn't have a big gimmick associated as a king. The victory itself in the tournament was kind of standard, but this man owes almost all of his bank account to the promo that he cut after winning this tournament, and that is Stone Cold Steve Austin, who won it in 1996. And there's a big argument to be made that Stone Cold Steve Austin not only was born, but he showed the world what he's about after actually winning this tournament. What do you think about Austin? And obviously, because he brings out the Austin 316 promo as a victory speech, really.
He really does. He defeated Jake Roberts, who at that point I think was having some kind of a religious gimmick or something like that. And he busts out you talk about your Psalms, talk about your John 3:16. Austin 316 says, I just whipped your ass. It's those phrases are the ones that the wrestling world most associates with Stone Cold, right? Maybe casuals think of the word what, but it's such an iconic graphic, an iconic soundbite. There's so much to it. And it was really, in many ways, this was probably the first inkling that we got of the Attitude Era, right? It was that first little burst of like, yes, Attitude is here. So you can't take this away. And mind you, going into 1997, because he won this in mid 1996, but throughout the year of 1997, it was clear that Stone Cold was very, very hot. So the momentum very strongly was building before his final world title victory in March, I think it was, of 1998.
Before we start eliminating contestants to try and figure out who we think is the greatest ever, are there any other names that you want to throw into the hat?
I think it's worth us just mentioning the name of Kurt Angle because he won it in the year 2000, right? And I think around the time of his victory, it may even still have been in his rookie year, his maiden year, or his main 365 days, which is a time in which he became world champion, European champion, intercontinental champion. I don't even know if he held the tag belt. I don't know if he completed the Grand Slam in his first year. Perhaps not. But to add on King of the Ring into that into that CV, into that resume, absolutely astounding, right? And I do have the vague memories of King Kurt. I think it was in maybe even in the game actually, in Smackdown 2, Know Your Role. Maybe there was a King Kurt gimmick. Don't quote me on that one. But certainly that was a big accomplishment for him as well in that early year to cement himself as one of these naturals.
Certainly, there are many other greats that have been King of the Ring before. We've listed many. I'm just gonna quickly just list it out again. So we've mentioned Booker T, Brock Lesnar, Harley Race, Randy Savage, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kurt Angle. Honestly, that would be probably, if they wanted to do it, the greatest ever Hall of Fame class ever, just as the greats of the King of the Ring. Who, for you, really stand out from this list is like your one or two, like they just really speak to you?
So my personal criteria for determining uh, who is the best from the whole list would be proximity to some kind of a world title victory, and then also how much did they lean into the gimmick, right? And I'll give you an example here, right? So someone like Brock Lesnar, 2 months later would become world champion, but he didn't really lean into the gimmick. On the other hand, someone like Harley Race really leaned into the gimmick, but was not soon to become WWF World Champion around that time. So these are the things that I'm thinking here. For me, the ones that really, really stand out to me are Kurt Angle for that point that this was in his rookie year and it was quite proximate to being world champion, but also he was leaning into the gimmick. Of course, Bret Hart for the exact same reason that he had the two. And of course, we've got to make a point of the fact that Bret Hart is the only one on this list to have multiple victories, right? That's got to speak volumes. And then, of course, the one that I was following when I was, younger and watching wrestling is Booker T, who got the gimmick so over that it was undeniable that he had to become world champion. These are the ones that I'm thinking of personally.
I have very similar opinions to you. Booker T stands out. I have way too much of a connection with it to not consider it among the best. Bret Hart is another one. Historically winning it twice. I mean that is a big deal. Then the other name that I would throw into hat instead of Kurt Angle is Randy Savage because of what he was able to do with it. But I think the two mutuals we have that I think it's worth being the final battle is Booker T and Bret Hart. Now, I think I know where we're both going to lean, but when you have to split hairs between these two, who's the one that edges it ever so slightly?
So now I'm going to invert my logic, and instead of saying how much did they lean into the gimmick, and then how much did they constitute proximity to world title status, I'm pretty sure that Booker T was the only King of the Ring to have the gimmick and be World Heavyweight Champion. So this is where it comes together, right? Furthermore, Bret Hart made the King of the Ring look good. He made the King of the Ring look great, just like a lot of these people on this list. Booker T was King of the Ring, inseparable, right? It wasn't like, it was kind of like Carnage versus Venom, right? Venom uses plural because it's the two sides, it's the possessor and the symbiote. Carnage bonds so closely with its victim or with its host that they become one, right? And they use singular. That was Booker T. He was the King of the Ring. He didn't just have the title. That was who Booker T was. So I'm gonna have to have him edge across. I don't know what you think.
And I say this is one of those rare moments in which there's complete agreement. I think Booker T is just the best. And also I think he's the greatest ever King of the Ring. No, like honestly, everything about it, it's because you're talking about all the different dimensions, and for me, it's the fact that he represents the perfect marriage of all the perfect elements for a great King of the Ring. The fact that he had a fantastic gimmick, he carried the title. He was funny when he needed to be, but he was serious when he needed to be. And the fact that he won the World Heavyweight Championship whilst being the character of King of the Ring, I think really just edges him past everyone else, even against the excellence of execution, Bret Hart, who's won it twice. So I think I'm going to call it. According to the Callous Corner Show channel, Booker T is the greatest ever King of the Ring. Let us know in the comments below if you agree with our decision or if you think we have royally stuffed it up. Let us know in the comments below.
All hail King Booker.
That brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be reviewing the continuing action heading towards King and Queen of the Ring, as well as towards AEW Double or Nothing. There's plenty of wrestling ahead of us, Thanasi. There's plenty to keep us busy.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and Ave Booker T.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.